Okay, this video we're going to cover a couple of different things. We're going to put in our little knee wall that's on the second story. You can sort of see it in this view here. If we scroll down to our second level floor plan, we can find out where it's placed because that's what's being shown right here. And if we go into our section view, we can then see related to height, and especially right here, then we can also see height. So we'll put in that knee wall, then we're going to add in our foundation as well as our floors. We'll probably do the floors first and then put our foundation in and put in our framing components for it. So we've got a couple of different things that we're going to cover in here, but I think that knee wall is going to be a good place to start. There are a few offsets too that we're going to have to do in relation to height for things. So for example, with these webs here, or I guess we can kind of call them trusses or beams that are going across for our ceiling, as well as then if I scroll up for the height to support that loft area. We are going to need to offset them down purely because of the fact of how thick the floor is. So when I'm doing offsets, when it comes to those, as well as then this I-beam here, I guess it's called technically a W-beam. This I-beam here, we're going to have to offset that down as well. I will tell you the amounts just by looking at the finished product that I have on another computer here. But I'm just not like making numbers up as I go. I'm just doing amounts based on like how thick this floor is and then this beam as well that's holding it up. So when I'm coming up with these offset amounts, just know that I'm taking them from the measurements that are based on our material thicknesses. But we'll start off with that knee wall and then we'll work on our floors. So I have my model here. I'm going to go into my level 2 floor plan and I'm going to draw in a wall across here and then use some dimensions to put it directly into place. So again, I'm going to use the wall tool, which is up in the corner, or keyboard shortcut WA. For this wall, we are just going to use the interior partition wall, but we're going to have to do some changes to the base constraints and the top constraint in order to make it kind of that floating wall that we have. So right now it's on level 2, but I'm going to give it a base offset of -4 feet. So that way it's going to start 4 feet underneath level 2. And then for the top constraint, I could have it go up to level 3 and then also give it a top offset. Or what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change its top constraint to be unconnected and then give it a total height of 8 feet. And I'm just going to draw a wall from one edge to the other, slightly below grid line B. And then I'm going to use my dimension tool to knock it into place. So again, dimension is keyboard shortcut DI or this button up here. And I'm going to do a dimension from this grid, and I'm going to use the tab key to click on the lower edge of this and then click to place my dimension. And I eyeballed it kind of into place. I'm off by 2 inches. So I'm going to hit escape a bunch of times, click on this wall, then click to edit this dimension. And I'm going to do 1 foot, 1.5 or 1.25, excuse me, inches. And then enter. And again, we can click on this script right here to drag the text out if the text is kind of in the way of our particular dimension line here. So I'm also going to, while I have this dimension here, I'm going to lock this one in place so that this way this knee wall doesn't move on accident. I just always think about locking them. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. We can place another dimension over here while we're at it. So I could do DI from the center of this to the edge of this knee wall, and it will kind of lock it in place to keep it in line with all of these other dimensions, just so I can have as many as possible from my original drawing or from the drawing we're trying to mimic in here. And then we can work on adding in our floor systems. Even though we're going to have stairs in here, I'm going to model the floor just as a full floor within the entire building and then kind of add my stairs later. Just going to find that a little bit easier to deal with necessarily than modeling the, I guess, staircase or around the staircase, since our stairs doesn't exist and we won't make the stairs until the next video. So I'm going to hit escape a bunch of times to just end my dimension command. And then while I'm on the second floor, I'm going to start the floor command. Again, this doesn't have a keyboard shortcut. You can make one, a custom one if you want. And I'm going to switch my floor type from this generic 12-inch floor to this P01 3-inch lightweight concrete on a 2-inch metal deck. I'm going to keep my wall core, extend to wall core set, and I am going to use the pick wall tool that it does by default. And so I'm going to select this wall as well as, and it went to the wrong side of the wall. Well, actually, no, it didn't. Never mind. I'm going to select that wall and this one. But while I'm here, I'm going to pull this grip up. As long as I'm keeping it on that blue line, I'm good. I'm going to click on my knee wall here, as well as this one. I will have to do a little bit of editing with these grips, so I'm going to click again to pull up. And I will have to edit this one too after the fact, but that's okay. I'm going to select all three in this stairwell. And then I'm going to have to use trim and extend to kind of clean up these walls, or clean up rather this floor a little bit. So I'm going to hit escape to just once, just to get out of the drawing command up here. And then I'm going to use trim and extend to bring this line and this line to a corner. It is warning me that now I have this issue here. I can just draw that in manually afterwards. So I'm going to click on unjoin. I'm going to join this corner. So still in this tool here, click, click. So that way I have one solid corner there. And if at some point you do have lines that don't meet, so I still have this line here not meeting, if I try to make my floor, it's going to tell me that right now it's saying that lines are intersecting. So I have, yep, so it's showing me about this issue over here. I'll click continue. I'm still in the trim and extend command. I can see it right next to my cursor. So I'll bring those. I thought this was going to be the issue that it was going to warn me about. So if I click on that OK, it says it must be a closed loop, and it's warning me that up here it's not closed. And I can either just draw a boundary line in manually, or I could have used the pick line tool as well to kind of connect that in. My level is level 2, which is fantastic and wonderful, just what I want. So I'm going to click on Finish Edit. Right now it's warning me that the floors, roof, topo solid overlap the highlighted walls. Would you like to join the geometry? So I'll say yes, please. And that's just going to make my section view a little bit easier to work with. And so I've got my floor now on my second story. In the original documents, that hatch pattern is there for the floor. We can keep it if we want. One thing that I've mentioned before in class is that I do not like when floors are kind of visible in the drawings. In this case, maybe it helps a little bit that this is open to the area, but you can use the command VG to do a graphics override. And here with the floors, we can say that we want no projection pattern on the surface. So I could just click on that and override it to not be visible. And then when I click OK, it's gone. Because of the fact that we are going to have those concrete pads sitting outside these doors, I'm actually going to not do that. I actually am going to keep it visible in all of my views, just to kind of keep everything consistent. And another thing too in this view before I exit out of my second story is I can see that I have a little bit of that underlay peeking through here from level 1. So I'm going to, while I have nothing selected, so I'm going to hit escape a bunch of times. I'm going to just scroll down in the floor plan properties and turn that underlay off. So that way it is just not visible in this view. Then I'm going to go into my level 1 floor plan, and I'm going to add a floor into there as well. And so from what we can see in this floor, if we go into our drawing here, let me just zoom out so I can scroll up a little bit faster. That's my roof. Okay. So we have, this is all going to be modeled as one just floor, including these pads out here. And they're going to come 8 feet out from that grid line, 14 foot over, 8 foot out, 14 foot over, 12 foot out on this side here, around where from our grid line and where our curtain wall is. So what I'm going to do then is go back into my floor tool. For this one, I'm going to use a 6-inch concrete slab. So I'm going to go to my properties and switch myself over. Remember that if you don't switch your properties over beforehand, you can go back and change it. And I am going to use just my pick walls tool to quickly just be able to select all of my walls, including my stairwell back here. Now this time it did go to kind of the outside of that core, and I can just use the arrow to flip it onto the inside. And then I'll also hit escape a couple of times, click on this one, use that arrow to flip it in. And then I'm going to use my trim and extend tool here to clean up my stairwell. So I'm going to do trim and extend to corner. This one to this one will get that warning again saying it can't keep this line and this line joined. So I'll say that's fine, please unjoin them. And then I just manually have to draw a line in over here. So I'm going to go into the line and from this endpoint to this endpoint. And then I'm also going to have to draw in my extending out my little pads here. So I'm going to, while I'm still in this line tool, I'm going to go from here down 8, enter, and I could do over 14, or I could just click. From here, I'm going to go down another 8. I don't even have to type it in because it is going to try to keep these aligned. So it's saying it's going to intersect there. And I could type 14, or it's going to show me again another intersection. And then another one here. So I'm just going down 8 over 14. And then one here from that intersection over 12. So this time I did have to type over 14. And then I can click. And now I'm going to again use my trim and extend tool to clean some of this up. Or I could also use, I don't know if this break or this split is going to work, but we'll see if we can do split with gap. I've never done it with a floor boundary. But essentially, if I click on this line here, I don't think it's going to work. So I can split this line. Okay, I split it into 2 pieces. And then I can hit escape a couple times, drag this one down to that endpoint, drag this one up to this endpoint. So that seems like our best bet. It seems like split with gap wouldn't let us, which is kind of a bummer. But we can do split element, slice this in half, click to slice this one in half, click to slice this one in half, hit escape about 3 or 4 times, and then we can drag these out. There probably also could have been like, I could have maybe not picked at this wall and then just manually drawn this whole little zigzag in. A bunch of different ways I could have approached it. This is just the way that I decided to do it today. And now I have my floor for level 1 complete. And so I'm going to click the finish sketch mode, and I have that floor modeled in. And now, even though level 3 is our roof, we are actually going to use the floor tool to draw in the roof. But we're going to do two separate floors, one floor in the stairwell itself and then another floor on the actual roof part. So I'm going to go into my level 3 plan. We do have the underlay from level 2 turned on in level 3. It's a heck of a lot more apparent when we are looking at it with that floor there. So while I'm here, I'm just going to make sure I scroll down about halfway and turn that underlay to none. And then I'm going to draw in a floor here. So I'm going to go back into the floor tool. Flat roofs are just easier to model as floors themselves. And for our roof, we're going to use the floor type of the P01 6-inch insulated metal deck. And I'm going to, again, use my pick wall tool for our roof is going to be as simple as just picking those 4. If it did extend to that outside of the boundary, we're just going to click to put it on the inside, so you could just use that arrow to flip it. And then we will say finish. And again, it's warning me, do you want to join geometry and cut out overlaps? So I'm going to say yes, because it'll make my modeling a little easier. This one doesn't have a texture that we're going to see, but that's okay. And then we're also going to draw in a floor boundary within our stairwell. And for the time being, we are just going to model it all as one and then cut out what we need to cut out for these stairs once we have them finish up here. So I'm going to go into the floor tool. I'm going to switch my floor type to the 3-inch concrete. And then I'm going to do pick walls. If I hover over the inside, I'm going to get the inside of that core. So it makes it a little easier. What does it mean it can't keep those joined? I don't know what they're referring to with that, but let's see. That's kind of weird. Haven't seen that before. I'm going to hit escape a couple of times. Flip that to the inside. There we go. Or I guess technically, I would want this one actually going to that outside because of the fact that this floor, this roof, ends right there. So we're going to need these floors to sit with each other. I'll hit escape a few times and then I need to trim and extend these to each other. So I'm going to use the trim and extend to corner, click, click. Over here, trim and extend to corner, click, click. Not sure why that error was popping up, but I fixed it. So if you get that error, just know that it's kind of a weird warning, or I'm sure it had a purpose. And then I'll say okay to make this, and I'll say yes, please cut out those overlaps. So now when we look at it 3D, we're also going to need to add a roof up here on level 5. Almost forgot. We have kind of our building take shape. We can't look in anymore. How can I know how I can do that level 5? I was thinking about it. I was like, how can I do it? It's going to have a little bit of an offset though to it in order to get it to sit in there. And so let me just double check what I have that offset as. We can actually do that floor even here within the 3D view if we want, but I'm going to do it in level 3. So I'm going to go into level 3. I'm going to go into the floor tool. I'm going to switch my level all the way at the top of these. So I just scrolled back up to the top and I say that I want this on level 5, but I want to give it a height offset of -1 foot. So that way it's just going to set in there a little bit. It's not going to be flush with the top. I'm going to switch my root to my roof floor, which is this 6-inch insulation. And then I'm going to use my pick wall tool to go 1, 2, 3. I think it's doing it on this wall because of the fact that we had to join or cut this wall from this one. That's my guess of why it's doing it to that one. but we can easily fix it using the trim and extend to corner tool to bring these corners to each other, bring these corners to each other, and then click our green check. And again, I almost always hit attach, which it looks like I didn't do a negative offset. It looks like I did a positive one. So I'm just going to click on this. And no, it says I have a negative offset. Oh, because I did that attach. So that's why. So I'm going to click on this. See, this is one of the scenarios where I wouldn't do an attach. So I'm going to edit boundary and just click the green check. And this time I'm going to click don't attach. And there we go. Looks like I am going to have to detach. So I'm just going to click on this wall, detach top to base, click on that roof, click on this wall, detach top to base. I don't know why I couldn't find the button for a minute. Click on that roof, click on this wall, detach top to base, click on this roof. And thankfully it fixed that little corner. I was wondering what was going on with that corner. And now we have our roof pretty much modeled. Ready to go. The issue that sometimes comes in this 3D view of the fact that we can't see anything within the building sometimes can be annoying. I'm not too worried about it in this scenario, but again, while you're in just the 3D view of the properties, we can scroll down and we can turn on the section box. And what the section box allows us to do is we can click on this box and we can pull to cut different parts in or out. So we can open the building this way. I can open the building height-wise if I need to see inside a specific part of the building. Or I can open it sort of in any direction. And so with that, I have my floors modeled and I'd be ready to start kind of working on, and my knee wall too. I have a little list here that I'm checking off. And I think now would be an okay time to work on our foundation. Now, Revit has automatic levels and presets for where floor plan cuts are being made. If you remember back to the beginning of the course and I talked about floor plans and how this cut is determined, I would say that it's usually 4 feet above the top of the floor. So if we go look at like a section here, that this floor plan cut, it's measuring 4 feet up and then slicing the building open to look at the floor plan. And that's where we can see things like doors and windows and their locations. When we're looking though at this foundation, we can see that level 0 for our foundation is actually 2 foot above level 1, which means if that 4 foot cut is coming up from level 0, it's actually going to be cutting above what we can actually see. So we're going to need to do a couple of adjustments between our view range in order to make it work. There's also a few things that Revit does with foundation type walls that work a little bit special, I guess, compared to other wall types. So we are going to have to make a couple of adjustments in order to make our foundation wall. So first thing is I'm going to go into my level 0 floor plan. And one thing that you have to adjust in this case, but not in most cases, this is just a mistake from the template, is that our visual style is currently in shaded. And so I need to adjust that to hidden line. Otherwise, everything's going to come in with a heavy gray color. And we also are going to need to adjust our view range. So that is within the properties. I'm just going to scroll down until I'm a little bit more halfway down until I see extents. And then I'm going to edit my view range. And I want to make sure that my cut plane is sitting at 1 foot instead of this negative 1 foot. So I want a cut plane of 1 foot. I'm going to keep this bottom of -2, so I'll be able to see things like my footing, and I'll leave that view depth as -2 as well. What that's going to allow it is so when we draw walls, we are going to be able to see them in here. But there's also another weird little quirk that foundation walls kind of have. So we are going to use just the regular old wall tool. We can put in a structural wall if we want. So I can label it as structural, but honestly, we're going to need to come and uncheck structural. But the kicker is, if I come here to my P01 foundation 12-inch CMU, it's going to automatically give it the structural condition, which also then will make it have a base constraint of level 0, which is exactly what I want. But it's going to apply a base offset of -12 foot automatically. Now, I don't want that. I want it to have a base offset of 0 and a top constraint of level 1. However, if I go to move out of here, it's going to say we cannot do that. So this is how I get around things like that. I leave this alone for the time being, and then I'm going to draw in my walls. I'm going to change my location line to the core interior and build my wall around this area here. And then I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to end the command. Then I'm going to hover over one of the walls and hit tab so I can select all of them. And then I'm going to scroll down in this list and I'm going to uncheck that it is a structural wall. This will then allow me to give it a base offset of 0 and a top constraint of up to level 1. That's also going to apply that hatch pattern because now this wall is something that is sitting or something that is visible within our area. And then we can also go and add in our stairwell walls for our foundation. You'll notice that these measurements are slightly different than what we had for our floor plan. And that's just because this wall has a different thickness than the one from our floor plan. So I'm going to, though, just draw in my wall. One thing I can also do to make it a little easier than having to change all those settings is I can use a shortcut called Create Similar, where I can click on this wall and I can right click and say I want to create similar, or I can use the keyboard shortcut CS. When I use the shortcut for create similar, it's going to just take whatever properties I had here. Hold on. Did I? No. Okay, well maybe something weird is going to happen, but we'll see. Just because I see that it gave it a base offset of -2 foot up to level 0, so maybe it doesn't matter anyway. But I'm just going to click to create my basic overall stairwell here, hit escape a bunch of times, hover over one, hit tab, click on the chain, and then I can come over here to undefine it as a structural wall, in which then it'll let me give it a base offset of 0 and an up to of level 1. So now I have it connected. I need to put in my measurements for where exactly it's going to be sitting. And I'm going to use the dimension tool, which again is keyboard shortcut DI, or this button here. And I'm going to measure from that grid to the face of this wall. So I'll hit tab and then click on it to place a dimension here. If I want to automatically go to faces, I can also use this here to just change if it's going to the faces of walls or the faces of core, to make it where I won't have to hit tab. It'll give me both the center and that edge automatically. So I'll place these 2 dimensions. I'll hit escape to end it. Or I hit escape a couple of times to end it. And I can click on this wall, change this dimension to 2 foot 7.5. Because that's what it is here. And then this one was 1 foot 7.5. This one I'm going to have to zoom in on a little bit in order to differentiate between the witness that's going to the middle or this one. 1 space 7.5, enter. We also need to frame it in this direction, which from center to center here, just because I have another, like I mentioned, I have another version sitting in front of me. And so it's showing me that the witness lines from the middle to middle is going to be 11 foot 1.25. This is one that I left out of your drawings by accident. But we can also then even take this dimension. I can move that witness to go to the edge if I hover over it and hit tab. And then I'm going to hold this witness and go to the grid. And then I'm going to click on this to place that as a permanent dimension on the drawing. So that way I just do have something of what it's going to be from that grid to out there. Then let's just look at our building 3D real quick, just to kind of confirm. We have a little bit of that foundation peeking out, which is fantastic. Yes, it is not aligned with the very edge of the building. That's intentional. It's aligned with the core of this wall, so not the finished face of it. And if we hover underneath, we can then also see that foundation wall, that 2 foot tall foundation wall. Next, within my foundation, I'm going to add in my footings and then these concrete pads here for my columns. So for my footings, I'm going to go into the structure tab and I can either use the keyboard shortcut FT or I can use this button right here to put in a concrete footing. If we look at our drawings, we have a 36-inch by 12-inch footing, and then these pads are 4 feet by 4 feet, and they're 12 inches deep as well. So I'm going to use this tool here, or again, keyboard shortcut FT. We'll see that we are currently putting in a 36-inch by 12-inch footing, which is the exact one we want. If we wanted a different size, we can change the size, or we can go into edit type and we can duplicate this and make our one with our own custom size for whatever footing size we need. But we already have the one we need. And so I'm going to hover over a wall. I can also use the tab key to just get a chain of walls to put a footing on easily for all of them. So again, I can hover over one, hit tab, and then click to just put a chain of footing all around. And then I can hit escape a couple of times to get out of there. For these concrete pads for our columns, or I guess these piers here, we're going to use this isolated foundation. When we go in there, it's going to tell us that none are currently loaded in, at least for mine. Maybe yours won't give you this error, or not necessarily error, just warning. But I'm going to click that yes, I want to load one. I'm going to scroll down until I get to structural foundations, and I'll double click, and we have one right here at the very top for a rectangular footing. So I'm just going to load this one in. By default, it gave me one that's 72 by 48 by 18, which is not the size that I want. So I'm going to click on Edit. I'm going to duplicate this one, and I'm going to call it a 48-inch by 48-inch by 12-inch. Keep in mind the name you give it has no actual bearing on how it operates. This is just to help me know which one it is. And then I'm going to change its thickness to 1 foot, and I'm going to change its length to 4 feet. Then, sure, I'd like to save my project, and I'm just going to place a concrete pad at the center of each of these. Something that you might notice too is that there is this option to place them at columns. We don't have columns right at the moment, so we can't put pads underneath them, but that could be just an easy way to put those pads in underneath our columns, but we didn't place our columns just yet, so we kind of can't do it. I'm going to hit escape a couple of times to end the command. And another thing that I want to do with these pads is I am just going to offset them down. So I'm going to click over here and drag to just only get these concrete pads. If I click and go to the left, I'm going to get the pads and the grid. I can use the filter function, which is either down here or up here, to say I only want the structural foundations. Please get everything else out of my selection. And I'm just going to give them a height offset of, I believe, -6. Yes. So I'm going to go -0, space 6. That's just going to move them down. Again, if we go into our 3D view, which they're not visible because of this section cut box. So if I move that section box down, we can now see where the pads are. My section cut was kind of hiding them a little bit. Or my section box, rather, was hiding them. Next, we are going to add in our columns and then add in our framing components within it. So I'm going to do my columns from level 0 anyway, purely because of the way columns function in Revit. If I did them on level 1, they're going to want to put them on level 0. When we put in our columns, we are going to go into either the column here, where Keyword Shortcut CL, or in the Architecture tab, it's going to do a structural column here. We can click on this arrow and say that we want architectural columns instead of structural ones. And we'll see that we don't really have the ability to select like height offsets and things like that. I'm going to switch my property to the type 6, purely because, or my type, because if we look at it in here, we can see that these columns, when they're pointed to, are the 6-inch columns. And then I'm going to place them 1, 2, 3. I've gotten some type of warning. A text structural foundation will be moved to the bottom of column. So all should be telling me is that, okay, that's kind of weird. It moved it down, not what I wanted. Let's just do them on level 1 instead. So I'm going to undo, Control Z a bunch of times until I had to do 3 times. I'll do them on level 1 since it did something I didn't want. I'm going to do a structural column again. Is it going to move them again? Oy. So what it's telling me now is none of them are visible in floor plan 1. But I need to check the plan's like settings. If I go into level 0, here they are. And so again, I can do a window like this to just only get those columns. And I'm going to have their base level as level 1. I'm going to change this offset. Instead of -9, I'm going to do -0, space 6. And for my top level, I want them to go up to level 3. And I'm going to want an offset here of -1 foot, 10 3/4. That's going to be the ceiling plus the web combined. So I didn't come up with this number out of nowhere, but since I have a file to look at for what that number should be, we can figure it out, or we can just use that as a little reference here. Keep in mind that if you're drawing something yourself, you'll have to figure out what that number would be. It's warning me that the structural foundation is going to be moved, so I'll say that's okay. And so now my concrete footing pads are back because they moved up that -6 inches. And when I'm in my level 1 plan, I can see my columns now because of the fact that they are now visible. Even in my level 2 plan, my columns are now there at the center of each of those grids. And if I look at it 3-dimensionally, we can see the columns at least through those windows. And if I slice my building open this way, we can see that they're going up to where everything's going to sit on here once we put in the rest of our structural framing pieces. So our next step would be to add in our girders and our beams. So I'm going to go into my level 2 plan and I actually want to create a duplicate of this plan so that way I can use it to create a framing plan from it. So to duplicate this view, I'm going to right click on level 2 and say that I just want to duplicate the view. I'm not going to duplicate it with detailing because I don't want all of those dimensions to necessarily come in with it. I don't need those dimensions here in the framing plan. And actually these windows and doors are going to go away in just a moment once we adjust our view range in this view. So we want to take that 4-foot cut and we want to move it down so we're going to be able to see the framing component sitting underneath here. And so for that, I'm going to, in this floor plan copy, I'm going to scroll down until I see extents. I'm going to edit this view range and I'm going to change this cut plane from 4 foot to -7 inches. So that way it's sitting underneath the floor. And then I'm also going to change this bottom to -3 feet. This view depth usually needs to match this bottom as well, from what I've found. When I click OK, my view has changed quite a bit because it's now showing me the view based on 7 foot or 7 inches, excuse me, underneath of where we were originally looking at. You can still see this knee wall. I'm going to hide it because I don't want it in this view. So I'm just going to select it, right click, hide in view, and I just want to hide this element. I don't want to get rid of all of my walls. I just want to hide that one particular wall because it's a little bit in my way. The next thing I'm going to do is just put in a girder down here on where my columns are. So I'm going to go into the structure tab and I'm going to use the beam tool here. So I'm going to do a beam. If we look at our, whoops, wrong thing. If we look at our framing drawing here, we have this is being labeled as a wide flange steel beam, and it is also tagged as a W 12 by 26. So let me get back to my drawing. So this is the one we're going to want to use. I'm going to want to place it just straight through here on that grid. And I'll hit escape a couple of times to end it. What I also want to do though is it's currently sitting, if we go look at it in my little 3D section cut, if I go to this home view, see how it's currently sitting flush with the top of the floor? We don't want that for this beam. So we could do this in any view. I can do it in this level 2 copy, is I want to offset this beam down. So I'm going to scroll up until I get to this constraints, and I'm going to give it a start and an end offset of the same amount. Otherwise it is going to sit slanted. And I'm going to give it a start offset of -0 space 7.5 and an end offset of -0 space 7.5 as well. That's just going to move it down. We can also now see our columns in here within this. And if we go look at it again in a 3D view, it shifted it down. I did that because this floor in total is 5 inches in total. And then we're also going to have the webs of those trusses going across that are going to need to sit within there. So that's where I came up with that number. I came up with it by combining all the materials and also looking at the drawing that I've created here or in the other one. We're also going to want to make another one of these up at the very top, just in line with it. So 2 ways we could do that. I could go to my level 3 view and I'm going to hit escape a couple times to just unselect the one I had. And I'm going to create a beam of the same size from midpoint to midpoint straight across there. It's warning me that I can't see it in this view, but I have in fact made it. And so that's where having your 3D view with a section cut available, even though without a section cut, I can still see that beam there. And I'm going to give this one start and end offsets as well. This time, I'm going to do negative 0, 10 and 3/4, so 10.75. And an end offset of negative 0, 10 and 3/4 as well, to accommodate the roof thickness and the materials for the web trussing there. So now it is just kind of floating down here. And then I'm going to put in that truss system. There are two ways I could think about approaching those trusses. One is a way that I've kind of been playing around with recently, but didn't know much about. So I'm going to try it again just so I can get sort of familiar with it. The other is placing one and then doing an array. So if we look at our framing plan, we have these webs here, and they are labeled as the 14K6, and they are spaced 4 feet on center apart from each other. So that means from the core of this wall here over 4 feet, and then 4 foot spaced in between each one of them. So one way I could absolutely do that is to use my beam tool, change my beam type to this web of the 14K6. I'm going to just place one, even though that's 4 foot from the middle. I can change it or fix it afterwards. And then I'm going to place a dimension using either this or DI, and I'm going to measure from that core. And keep in mind, mine's coming up automatically now because I have this changed. If I had it on wall centerline, I just need to hit tab so I can click on that to the middle, click to place that dimension, hit escape a bunch of times, click on this truss. Would it technically be a truss? I don't think so, but that's just what I'm going to call it. And I'm going to move it over to be 4 foot. And then I can delete that dimension that I used to at least help me place it. And then what I can do is make an array of these. So I'm going to select the one that I've already have, and I'm going to use the array tool. And I'm going to say that I want to copy it from its middle, which I guess really I could even copy it not off of its middle, but I'm going to say from the middle over 4 feet. I could also just type in 4 foot, or I could move over 4 foot. And then if I zoom out, it's asking how many of these do you want in total? And I'm going to say, I think we want 19 in total. So 19 was the correct guess. As I mentioned, I have made this building before. One thing that an array does that sometimes isn't great is it does keep it as a modeled group. So we can say that we want to ungroup it. Each of these is still a model group. So what I'm going to have to do is kind of select them like so, filter out my selection, uncheck everything except the model groups, and then ungroup them. And now each one of them should operate as its own structural framing piece, which is great because now I can adjust their ends and their starts and their ends for their offset. Otherwise, we can't do any editing with them. Because again, if I look at it 3D, I have that same issue of these are sitting inside, which is not great. So I'm going to go back into my level 2 copy. I'm going to select everything in here again, filter everything out, except this structural framing other. And then I'm going to give them a negative start offset of negative 0 space 5 and a negative end offset of negative 0 space 5. If I make those numbers two different things, it's going to put them in on a slant. Nothing looks like it changed in here, but if we go into our 3D view, we're cutting a web in such a exact spot that it looks super weird in the section cut. If I move that over slightly, we're able to see the actual web sitting in there. And if we look at it from the right view, we can see too that the way we offset this girder down, they sit where they're going to be installed. The other way I could have gone about making these is, and feel free to skip ahead if you don't care, is I could filter this out, uncheck everything except my framing, and then I can delete them. The other way I could have gone about doing it was this beam system. And I've never had used the beam system before, so I kind of wanted to play around with it. So I can do beam system and then pick, or I guess draw in the rectangles. So from here to, actually I do want to do it in the, no, to there. My beam direction is going horizontal. I want to change my beam direction to go on the vertical. So I'm going to click on that option and click here. For my distance, I don't want 6 foot, I want 4 foot. And then if I say finish, it's put in a beam system for me without me having to measure all that out. I can also click on said system and I should be able to, oh no, am I going to have to unpin all of them to change that offset? Because that's going to be annoying. Okay, now if I click on the edge of the beam system, I can change this elevation to 0, -0 space 5. And then I have pretty much the same thing of what I made the first time around, but sort of an easier way to go about doing it. One sort of annoying thing is that it added these tags to every single one of them. Don't really need that. I wonder, can I edit its type and can I change that tag to go on it by default? Let's see. Again, I haven't really played with this function just yet. If I do tag member none, what if I edit fixed spacing, beam type? This is how I could change the beam type if I needed to. So I guess not, which that's kind of annoying. I can click on each one of these and delete them. I could also do it this way and just delete a bunch of them in one fell swoop, but only just keep like one tag there. Probably not even the one I wanted to tag. I'm going to delete all of them so that way I don't have to do it twice over. And I can make additional beam systems on my roof. For the roof ones, we are going to want to have an offset of -8¼ inch. Before I finish off this framing plan for level 2, what I'm also going to do is just rename this level here for the floor plan. So I'm going to right click, rename, and I'm just going to call it level 2 framing. So that way it's not just called level 2 copy. I'm going to go into my level 3 and I'm going to make a beam system again in level 3, or I could I make a copy of this? So I can click on this beam system here and say copy, and I could copy it from, say, this might be a little too much. I could say copy from here to here, but then change this beam system. I'll click on the edge of it. Now it seems the work plane has to, unless I say edit work plane, pick a plane. level 3 then. It just won't let me type in a plane amount. Aha, edit work plane, and I can say put it on level 3. That's fine, unjoin them. And then I can give this one a negative elevation of 8.25. And so now I have this one up here. This might be a little bit too much. What I would probably do instead of doing all these copying, because then I can also go into level 2, take this, copy, and I'm just going to go from that endpoint to sit right on top of it. It's warning me that there's identical instances, but I'll say that's fine. I'll click on the structural beam, edit work plane, level 3, and then I'll change that height to that negative 8.25. And then if I look at it 3D, I have these sitting up here. So that might be a little bit more than, say, what like a regular Joe Schmo could figure out. So let me just Control Z until those are gone, and then show how I would go about putting in my framing for level 3. I would go to my level 3 plan. I know that I want to go from kind of that face core to that middle grid line. So I'd go to level 3. I'd place a beam, or I could also do a beam system up here from grid line to grid line. It's warning me that I can't see it in this view, so I could make a copy of it. That's going to be kind of annoying. I could also temporarily, while in level 3, I could hit escape a couple times, and I can adjust my view range and just set it back to 4 foot afterwards. But I can make this view range negative 7 inches like my other one was. And then change my bottom to, let's do negative 1 foot. We don't want to change too much around. Okay, so now at least we can see where this beam is. I can place a dimension for it based off of from grid line to the middle of it. Hit escape a bunch of times, click on this beam, click on my dimension, change it to 4 foot. Hit escape, click on this one. I could change its offset beforehand as well before I do an array of it. So I could do negative 8.25 and level offset negative 0 space 8.25. Well, now it's gone from my view because of where I have that cut made. So let me hit escape a bunch of times, scroll down, change my view range again. I do negative 3 foot. I'll change that to negative 10. So now I can see where it is. And then click on it, make an array, 4 foot over, and I want 19 in total. Click on this dimension and delete it. Do another one right underneath it. So I'll do beam from, is there a way I could get that nice on the center there too? Just so I don't have to measure twice over. Well, I guess not, no. So I placed a beam then from this one over, dimension, from my grid to its middle, click to place it, hit escape a few times, click on this one, 4 foot, click on it again, change that net to a negative 0, 8 1/4. My end offset, negative 0 foot, 8 1/4. If I change it beforehand, I'm going to click on this to delete. I just don't have to change all of them after I do an array. And technically I could keep it as a model array too. I'll click on this guy, array, 4 foot over, 19 in total, and then hit escape a bunch of times and reset my view extends. So I'm going to go back into view range, and I'm going to set my cut plane back to 4 foot. I'm going to set my bottom back to 0. I'm going to set my offset back to 0 and apply. So I can't see them at all, but when I'm looking at a building section, I am able to see them and where they're sitting and where they are. And the same thing that in section 2, I'm able to see them. I could have also done a beam, that beam structure or that beam system. I could have done the same thing on level 2. Couple of ways I could have approached those beams. I probably would have done it the way I showed it the first time, but I think maybe that might be a little too much for someone's second Revit project. So with that, at this point, we have our foundation all set and ready to go. We've got our columns set and ready to go. We've got our beams and girders. We have that knee wall. We have our floor. In the next video, we're going to add in our stairs and components, as well as create our rooms and our tags. And then in video 4, we'll go over annotations and kind of finishing up our detailing. In video 5, we'll do our wall section and all of the details within that. And video 6, we'll go over placing it on sheets.